Welcome to the Heartlight podcast, and today we have Bill Frase with me, and we are going to talk about topics of divine love and related things as usual. So, welcome, Bill.
Hi, Artto. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, and thank you for joining. So, of course, our goal is to provide as much value as possible to our listeners, and we want to be of good influence, and we want to bring light and truth and goodness and love into other people's lives. And we are hoping to be a valuable and useful influence. So that's why we are making this podcast today. And I believe Bill has some stuff to share, and a lot of stuff to share actually. But inside this 1 hour, I guess we won't be able to go through all of it. But anyways, I would actually first ask you a little bit of background information on you, and also including a little bit about your spiritual journey.
Yeah, so I come from the United States. I was born in Ohio, live in Pennsylvania now. And in terms of my spiritual background, my whole life, I always felt that there was something not quite right with the world. And I determined, I think even at a very young age, I'm going to figure out what's really going on and do something about it. And so, and at the time, I don't think I realized that was actually a spiritual thing going on within me that is actually, related to my purpose and things. But so I'm married. I have a son who's in his first year of college right now. I've been on the spiritual side, seeking divine love for about 25 years now. Been married for just a little bit longer than that. And in terms of my career path, I've done work in research, statistics. My background is in sociology and theater arts. Worked as an actor and stage manager. And I've spent the last 18 years in terms of my paid employment working with people with disabilities and helping them to achieve their desired employment outcomes. I'll leave it at that. It's I kind of went back and forth between what I consider material and spiritual. And
Were you also a church goer when you were younger, or how about that side?
Oh yeah, when I was younger, my parents they joined a local Presbyterian church. And so I have memories of going to church and vacation Bible school, Sunday school, worship services when I was younger. But it was pretty much a Sunday thing. It's just one of the things that we did on Sunday. And yeah, so I found it interesting. And I really liked the stories about Jesus and who he was and what he did and those kinds of things. I don't really remember much that way. And then there were years where my parents were involved in all kinds of different things, work and personal wise, where we didn't really do church. But then my brother and I both wanted to go to church. So we started going to church when we were in junior high. And it would just be my parents would drop us off and we'd go to church and then they'd take us back. So there was something there that was going on that that where I felt this attraction, and I don't think it was necessarily to church, but something spiritual, something deeper or more profound,
right.
even in those experiences. Yeah, and now I attend a local United Methodist church, and I'm involved in some of the ministries of that church, and I have a circle of light that was started within that church, and now through the beauty of Zoom has people from different places around the world who join us in prayer, which is lovely.
True story. Well, yeah, I also was a seeker in that sense that I was dissatisfied with my condition back in the days. And when I started on the church road, so to speak, I think I started in the Baptist church back in 2005. So after a few years, I sensed that, I'm not that much like Jesus and his followers and other guys in the Bible, which I actually wanted. So I was also dissatisfied because I wanted more. I wanted a greater development and to be able to function at higher levels, so to speak, and also to have changes in me because I noticed things that I didn't like about myself, some darkness, some bad thoughts, attitudes which I didn't like, and so forth. So I was looking for a way out. And that's why I Googled for messages from Jesus, and I found the Paget messages, of course. So how was your journey to the Paget messages? Were you also seeking for similar solutions, or what was your issue?
I kind of do this very briefly in my book Soulfire, but I came to a point where I really, kind of similar to you, but with a level of intensity that was very challenging to me. I came to a deep place of self-loathing, self-hatred, where I felt like a really terrible person, and I didn't like kind of who I'd become, and so. And it was also related to past memories. I'll call them traumatic memories too. So I literally had this situation where these memories were constantly getting triggered in my life and bringing me literal, like my heart hurt. Like I felt like I was dying inside. Like that they weren't heart attacks, but I felt this constriction around my heart that was just really troubling. And I'm a young person in my 20s, and I'm like,
Yeah.
am I going to die like this? And also, but it wasn't just the physical aspect. It was this aspect of I had this emotional, almost like emotional, spiritual sort of despair about it. And I'm thinking to myself, because I had studied a little bit of the afterlife, and I realized that, life continues in the afterlife. We don't cease to exist. And I'm like, am I going to be stuck with this forever? Like, I had no information or idea of how I could be free from this sort of angst and guilt and shame and everything. And so I just, and as I'm going through this, just within myself, no one in my world knows that any of this is happening. I'm just like struggling with it internally. And I came to a point, and I remember this thought. It was like, maybe there's something that Jesus taught that isn't in the Bible. Because I think at that point I had read through the New Testament, and there was something, I thought there's something different, that maybe he knows something, and it goes back to my childhood, right? I'm this child, and I love Jesus, and I think he's awesome. And, I don't believe everything they tell me about him, but I'm like, a lot of what he's talking about makes sense, love, and, and all these different things. And so I had that thought, and then I was in graduate school at the time. This is pre-Google. So I used Netscape to find where I searched something like Jesus' original teachings or something like that, And so the internet was tiny then, compared to what it is now. And I remember there was one or two sites that came up that pointed to the Paget messages. And so I started reading those messages. And initially, I was struck by them, but they reinforced some things I already knew. But there was all this new information, and then the constant message was pray for God's love, and you get all of these benefits that come with it.
Yeah.
And I started doing that, and so and it's funny. Like sometimes you have these miraculous healings, like whoa, something's just blown my mind, and other times it's like this one was very subtle, where just one day I thought back to those memories that were causing me so much trouble and heartache, literal heartache. And when I thought about them, the pain was gone. And I was like, what? Whoa. Oh my, I realized that I had received a healing. And the only thing I could attribute to was the only thing that I knew was different was I was engaging in this prayer practice. I didn't feel anything. I didn't know anything was going on. I'm like, the messages say to do this. I'm just going to do this thing. And so that was sort of the first moment of, I'll call it conviction, where I'm like, okay, this is real. And we're talking about real power here. Even if I can't feel it, I have now seen a result.
Yeah, it's
and so
effective.
Then that encouraged me to continue going.
That is encouraging, because I believe there are many people having similar things and they can relate to your story and your previous condition. So I believe this is already helpful right now to know of this. So thank you for sharing. And the effectiveness of the prayer for the inflowing of divine love of God actually really works. And I have sensed similar effects. Love basically brings healing.
I didn't think love was real. I didn't think that it was a power. And I had no understanding of the distinction between the love that's implanted in us as human beings, the natural love, and the difference that, God has this different love that's supercharged or whatever that, does even, wonderful things beyond that. I was so in my mind, I was just so like, in my mind, how am I going to get out of this box I've gotten myself into? My mind got me into it. And what I know now is that the only way that I know to get out of the mental box is through receiving God's love. I'm now thinking about that quote, I think that's attributed to Albert Einstein, that you can't solve a problem at the same level of thinking that created it. Well, yeah, but for me, you can't solve a problem created by the mind with the mind, because the mind just layers problems on top of each other. It's the soul, it's that love that comes into the soul that then has the ability to break, to dissolve, to heal those wounds and challenges and constrictions that have been created by the mind. And that's something that I know now. I think a lot of people think, oh, Bill believes this is true. No, I'm not talking about what I believe. I'm talking about what I know through personal experience, and that's just very, to know that that's true, like to have that as a foundation for my entire existence, and to know that there are other people in this world like yourself who know this, is just really, really exciting to me.
Yeah, if divine love wasn't real also in my life, I wouldn't be making this podcast right now. So I wouldn't bother. So yeah, of course, the core thing is to pray for God's love to heal you, to transform you, to save you actually. To save you from hellish conditions and everything. So I think I already mentioned that in some of my previous podcasts. But anyways, because there are so many so-called broken people having brokenness. Yeah, I think that's coming because of lack of love. May it be lack of love for themselves, or lack of love from the parents, or schoolmates, or whoever, basically. If the love is lacking, then it creates this void, or then in that case, people don't function correctly as they are intended. Because love is like the main thing that we operate in or with, because in a sense we are love, the natural human love, so to speak, our main component. And if this is pure working in action, then things work out, of course, completely much better. So people who are struggling with finding love, or with self-love, or some other like dark thoughts, then I believe what could help them and benefit them a lot, like it has benefited me, is to just ask God to infill your heart and soul with His divine love. And it comes, and you can get so many changes that you probably would not expect, I would even say. And God's love actually does much more for you than you can imagine right now. So this is just my encouragement for every listener to just test it out, to try it out, because there's nothing to lose. There is nothing to lose. There's only win and gain through this. And it's freely available to everybody. You don't even need to go to church or anywhere. You can just pray. God hears you wherever you are. So,
yeah, your comments are to make me think about, because in my experience, because I spend a lot of time with people who've been churched, who spend a lot of time in church, and there's a lot of talk of belief, and I hear such interesting things that people will say about, like, well, maybe God will answer this prayer, or this or that. And, and I do my best whenever I get the opportunity to let people know that God, the creator, the source, I like to use lots of different names, the heavenly parent, the one who created us, that this ultimate reality has created perfect laws that work 100% of the time. And they especially work when we're talking about the soul, and we've got the law of activation, where when the soul desires, expresses that deep desire for that one-ment or union with the source through the power of divine love, that response happens immediately. I mean, we can get into the details of the Holy Spirit and all these different things, but I mean, just knowing that, is so revolutionary compared to how so many people think of God as kind of this arbitrary person in the sky who's like, well, I'll answer their prayer, but I'm not going to answer yours. Oh, no. Prayers from the soul always get answered. Mental prayers, that's a whole other, we're dealing with other laws there, but we're talking about the soul here, the transformation of the soul. And God is not going to deny anyone who sincerely desires this to receive it. And so for me, like, it's, for people who are scientifically minded or really intellectual, I talk about it in my book, is like, you can do the experiment. You can ask for this love from the depths of your soul. I'm not saying you're going to get an immediate response, but like with anything, most scientists, they don't run a single experiment and say, oh, we've discovered X. No, they run repeated experiments. Other people try the experiments. They share what they find. They put it in journals. I mean, it's not that different for divine love because we're dealing with spiritual law. Now, everyone's perceptions are unique, but ultimately, those people are going to know that something has happened, just like your story, just like my story. And what we find out over time is that, oh, it's not just that. I can receive healing for other things. My attitude is different. I see the world differently. I know things that I don't know how I know them now, but I know them, and I didn't read them in a book, but I just know they're true, or you have these perceptions or things. So your comments just made me think about that we're dealing with, not an arbitrary creator who, just chooses willy-nilly what to give to people, but a creator who has designed perfect laws that operate, with exact efficiency and precision, in service of all of creation, obviously us included, being made in the image and likeness of the source. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And by the way, right now you were sipping some water, and I was thinking of water actually, because how do you know that the water takes away your thirst or thirstiness? Well, you drink it to test it. Okay, it worked this time. Okay, you drink some more. Next day, you feel the same effect. Oh, it works. Let's try if it works tomorrow. You go, you drink some water. Hey, my thirst is gone. So it's working. So this is how scientists basically are supposed to do tests and experiments, like you said. And the same you can do with God. You can try repeated prayers for receiving God's love into yourself. And when you start receiving it, you will feel effects. If the desire is there and the prayer is sincere, it will come. If you are open and ready and willing to receive, it will come. So it will not be withheld from anybody. And I'm just encouraging for everybody to test this out. Because, of course, not to those who don't want to change their lives, who are like, let's say, they think they have it all. No problems, no need or desire to develop themselves in anywhere. So, yeah.
Yeah, and, I was like the point that you just made about people who are kind of satisfied in their lives. I'm going to put this way in that, like, I'm now able to look at my life, and even though, there's been darkness and challenges and difficulty, I'm able to look at those things now, and a lot of it, most of it, I created myself. I did these things to myself, but I'm grateful for them because they are the things that brought me to divine love. I mean, I was the kind of person who needed to be super desperate to find, to say, okay, it's bad. Like, it's really bad. I got to get help here. I don't know where else to go to get what I need. And, I know that that's not everyone's journey, but I do have concern for those who are really satisfied with their lives on this plane, because if I was, would I have sought this? Would I have sought it out, or would I have just kind of been happy going along in my everyday life? And so even those who might listen to this podcast are like, you know what? I'm good. I got everything's covered. Okay, there's this little nagging thing, but it's not that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
The little nagging thing is telling you, even if it's just a little nagging thing, is like, there's something missing. And part of my message is, you can't go wrong with divine love. It's only going to add to your quality of your life, your existence, your ability to impact other people's lives for the better, to impact the world, to come to have greater knowledge of one's purpose and find meaning, in one's life. Because the human condition, the mental conditions on this planet are so dark, and they're so thick and interconnected and everything. And so, that's the thing that I think blocks so many people, where they think, well, okay, I'm good enough, or I'm kind of putting up with my life, or I'm content. Those are fairly dark conditions, in my humble opinion, especially on the earth at this point, because there's a lot of things going on that are not pleasant. And but when we seek God's love, we have the capacity, the ability to really not only change our lives, but to be a force for light and love in the world too.
Right. Although one more comment, I guess with contentment, having contentment, I think you didn't mean having contentment is a bad thing.
No, I wouldn't say it's a bad thing. I think,
but it can
I think that
close
there are a
your
lot of people
opportunities to
who-
finding something more out there that is actually meant for you to find, but people are closed because they're content.
Yeah, and I think that what people, and again, it's so hard talking about these things in words, but that there are a lot of people who sort of convince themselves that it's okay. So contentment's probably a bit strong of a word. More of it is more along the lines of self-deception, of like us telling ourselves that things are better than they really are, and just shoving stuff under the rug. Because that's what I did up until the point where things blew up, where I'm actually having chest pains. I just kept telling myself, oh, it'll be fine. Oh, you sweep it under the rug. You just keep putting it under the rug.
Until you are cornered.
Got a big pile of stuff.
Until you are cornered. And you need a change.
Yeah, it's like, I got to dig out now because I've just buried myself under all this yuck, and I didn't know I was doing it, because I was in denial.
Yeah, sometimes we are blind to our acts and even attitudes and stuff, and we don't understand how we ended up like this or in these situations or with those kind of friends or doing those activities and so forth. But I think it's a good wake-up call, so to speak, to give more thought to those things like, okay, you are in this condition, this situation. Okay, how did you end up here? Like, what were the choices? And do you really like your life? Do you like yourself? Are you going in the direction that you are in your heart feeling that this is the right way? Or are you like distracted or looking for your way? So at least the divine love was the way out for me. You also mentioned meaning. Yeah, I also found a meaning for my life because love brings meaning. When I got divine love in my heart, this actually kind of like filled like a hole like a circle in me in some ways, and I sense that there is a reason for my life and I exist for a reason, and of course I have sensed that I am loved because this is a way to know God and his attitudes toward me or towards all of us. And when here I would like to bring a little bit of my own experiences. That many times in prayer I have been asking for God's love, and it has happened that I have felt what God's attitudes are towards me, and through this I can actually know how he's like. It's like a communication from soul to soul, and it's not like a guesswork or hoping that maybe God is like that. It's like because the information is just flowing into you, coming like radio waves or like Wi-Fi, and you're realizing, hey, okay, I'm getting this knowledge and how things really are. So this also has many of those experiences which have been wonderful, have changed my view on God, or the Creator, the Father, as I like to call him. So I am not afraid of him as I used to be, in that sense that running from him, especially when I had done things that I thought that were displeasing to him, or so I was like running away because of shame, fear, and knowing that maybe I don't deserve love anymore, or he probably hates me by now, or something else like this. But I later realized, hey, I'm wrong. I'm just inventing those fears and thoughts myself, which have absolutely nothing to do with truth of how his attitudes really are, and how he looks at me and wants me to feel about myself, know about myself, and know about him. So I have learned a lot through prayer and through receiving divine love, which has opened more of my soul senses to knowing the truth and truth about him and myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks, Artto. I totally agree. I think one of the things that came up for me as you were sharing that is this idea of judgment. Like, just the other day, I heard someone talking about Jesus judging and God judging, and I like, when I hear people say that, it's so sad to me. I'm just like, that they don't know that there's no judgment in the Creator. God does not judge. God is unconditional love radiating to everyone. And the question is, are we willing to receive it? And the fact, and it breaks my heart when I hear people talk like that. I'm like, oh my gosh, but I'm also grateful at the same time that I know that we do not have a creator who judges. This is making me think of a story too, where years ago I was just doing stuff in the house, and it came up. I said, "Oh God, thank you so much for forgiving me." And I heard this voice in my head that said, "I didn't forgive you." And I was like, "What? You didn't?" And, when I went through my own process, sometimes I went to the dictionary and I looked up the definition of forgiveness. And forgiveness was, when I looked at every single definition, it was this human forgiveness where what we do as humans is, we love someone, then they betray us, then we stop loving them, then we forgive them.
Exactly,
okay?
yeah.
And when I said that to God, that's kind of what I was saying at that time. I was thinking about forgiveness in this human sense. And when I thought about it, I realized, no, God has been loving me this whole time, this entire time. And God was waiting for me to receive that love, to know that I am loved unconditionally. And so my mind interpreted that as human forgiveness. And so I'm not going to say that there isn't such a thing as quote unquote divine forgiveness, but that forgiveness, you can't find it in the dictionary. At least I didn't in my whatever version I looked at. There was no definition where forgiveness was, I love you unconditionally. It wasn't there. It didn't exist because, again, we're so used to humans of choosing who to love, when to stop loving them, when to love them again. But God doesn't play that game, and so I was so grateful for that communication where I gained this distinction, and I'm sure that people would be like, God told you he didn't forgive you? They'd be like, this is shocking. It's like, well, but I experienced divine forgiveness through this flow of unconditional love that I eventually allowed God to bless me with, that God always wanted to give to me, but I wasn't willing to receive it because I was closed off to it. So anyways, what you said, that all came out there. So hopefully that's helpful to people.
It is. Actually, forgiveness. Yeah, this is how it usually works. Like you said, you do something that someone else disapproves, and then like I said, he or she stops loving you. And you, when you have done this thing, you are actually charging yourself for doing that bad thing and making this other person miserable or hurt as well, disappointed. And to that degree that you are not getting love from that person anymore. You are being closed out, left by yourself, and you feel guilt and other stuff. Of course, we know what happens when we do something bad to others and they don't want to forgive and so forth. But actually, when we forgive others, we actually just continue our attitude of giving love to that person again. Because we just made it stop. In the sense that, let's say, love is flowing out from us, in front of us, like water going. And then we decide to not love that person anymore, or not to forgive, then we cut the flow of love in some way, and it's blocked to that person. And then when we forgive, we let it open again, and we let the love flow and go again. So that's what we as humans do, as I understand, keeping unloving attitude.
Yeah, and something else is coming to me too as you're talking, is that a big part of the forgiveness that I experienced was the forgiveness of myself. That it was my lack of forgiveness toward myself that prevented me from experiencing the love, either my love for myself, the Creator's love for me, other people's love for me, and it also prevented, it works both ways, right? It prevents me from loving myself, loving the Creator, loving others, loving creation, so it's, that I think a huge barrier for so many people is that, and like when I told my initial story, when you asked about originally discovering that divine love was real, it was my self-hatred, my self-loathing, my inability to even forgive myself for mistakes that I had made, that self-hatred, that anger, that self-loathing. And I sense so many people in that situation, maybe it's less intense for them or whatever, but it comes up. They'll have something that triggers it, and they're like, oh, why did you do that? That was so, and there's this lack of forgiveness toward ourselves too. So, yeah, I mean, love, we're talking about spiritual laws here, and love is meant to flow every which way, every direction, through all the different dimensions. And yet we as humans, we've set up these mental constructs and constrictions and paradigms and ideas where we say, oh no, love only flows this way, and it doesn't flow this way, and I'm not going to let it flow over there to that person or that circumstance or whatever. And what we're called to, I mean, if we are, for me, it's the Creator is the source, sending unconditional love in every direction for every entity throughout the cosmos to experience it or not. And we are meant to be like these mini suns, like, are we going to radiate unconditional love and light in every which direction to everyone and everything? Or are we going to be like, oh no, you know what? I'm only going to put it through this little keyhole here. So you only get to experience this itty bitty, microscopic amount of love. And I'm going to keep the rest of it to myself, which again, you do that and you're going against natural and spiritual law. And anyway, so that's just what you were saying there reminded me of that too, that this lack of forgiveness that we have for ourselves oftentimes then manifests in our lack of forgiveness toward others.
Yeah, blocking the flow of love. And about disappointment, I kind of sense that we should talk about that. I think disappointment is, in that sense, we are sometimes disappointed with ourselves of acting in some ways, and also thinking that God is disappointed with us. So meaning that God doesn't love us anymore, now we need to ask for forgiveness. But when we ask for forgiveness from God, well, I have done this, and I have sensed love mostly, and then I know that I am forgiven. But the point is that I was all the time forgiven, but I just didn't know about it. I was just, with a disappointment, I was closing myself. I was closing my love flow, or like making a wall. And this wall was creating this darkness to some degree. And it's not very healthy to do that, actually. But the point is that when we disappoint other people, we see how they act with us. They react in like rejection. They react like not loving us anymore. And this is how we learn also to do the same thing. When people disappoint us, then we choose to not love them. So, and to get over this disappointment, we kind of need a knowledge of that we have been given a second chance, which is in a way like a forgiveness. Second chance meaning that, okay, I will love you again if you change your ways, if you change your attitude, if you promise you don't do that again, and so forth. But God is in that way different. He's very patient. He's not like angry with us or anything like that. He's not punishing or anything like that. And he's only working through love. And he knows that through love, everything can be made to work and function properly and correctly. Also human relationships and our internal being and everything will go into maximum harmony. So love works, and love is the solution, not anything that works against love, which is mostly fear, I would say.
Yeah, we tell ourselves, self-gratifying stories about why we're justified in not expressing love. But the reason we have to tell ourselves those stories is because we know deep down that we are supposed to express unconditional love. And so that's why we have to justify it, right? We have to tell ourselves a story like, well, this person doesn't deserve love, and I'm this kind of person, and they're that kind of person, and the world is this way. It's all an illusion. Whenever we are justifying anything we do, it's all illusion. It's all made up. It has nothing to do with reality, nothing at all. But because it's so common, we're all just kind of sharing this simulation of mutual self-justification, like, oh, they did that to you. Yeah, they deserve that. And you're a good person because, how could you be expected to love them when they treated you that way? Mm-hmm. And that's not how God works. I mean, That's what you're talking about. God is calling us to act in a very different way. And this is why in the Bible, Jesus talks about that everyone is your neighbor, and we are to love our enemies, and all these things. I mean, these are real teachings, and people are just like, oh, that's impossible. Well, it's impossible on our own, but it's not impossible ultimately, if we allow God to change us from within. Mm-hmm. There's so many people thinking that there's going to be something that someone's going to think up that's going to change the world. And that's what I thought it was as a kid. I'm like, oh, we're going to invent something, or we're going to discover some secret of the mind that's going to just turn it all around. And I had no awareness of the soul. I had no awareness of the Creator's love until I went looking for it and was told that it existed. And once I found it, I realized this is the answer. This is the answer to everything. Like, people are looking for the answer to this and to that and to this problem and that problem. They're looking for it in their mind. The answer is in the soul. It is in the expression of unconditional divine love through human souls in this world. That is the answer. And I think a lot of people are challenged by that because it is ridiculously simple. Not easy, but simple.
Yeah. Truth is simple. Although, of course, the fears are always of the mind, but love is in the soul. And love wants to work out its ways in us and to express itself through us and in us and so forth. And we feel this. We want to do it. We want to do according to the love in us. But our mind is that we often use for blocking ourselves and also for blocking love, blocking the expressions of love. Because we think, hey, maybe it's better if I keep myself from doing that good thing or saying those beautiful words or maybe even respecting myself and keeping a good posture or thinking good things about myself, meaning that including loving myself and also to express love in the streets, like smiling to people and stuff. We are so much afraid. Well, by we, I mean most of the people, I would say, think that, okay, when I smile to people, what happens? Maybe someone thinks, hey, why are you smiling? And things are looking bad and you're afraid of judgment and not receiving love from people. And it's too much risk to show love sometimes. At least this is what your mind says, because it can mess your things and your world up to some degree. But what happens if you start living the love? If you stop caring about the fears and you will just overstep the fears with love, like making a decision, okay, I will express love. It may be risky, doesn't matter. Let's see, let's test this out. Let's see what happens. Let's try expressing love and let's see what happens. And then if everybody would start doing this, well, we could change the world into a very different condition. Starting with ourselves, our own attitudes. And that's where we need to start, actually. The only person we can change is ourselves. And it's worth it.
Yeah, and I think part of what came up for me as you were speaking was that we also have these mental structures that say, well, if I express love to someone, then I should get it back. But that's not always a guarantee, and the way I think about it is it's a really common metaphor is that, when we approach a wounded animal to help them, oftentimes they will snap or bark or bite, or I'm thinking of a dog in this case, or a cat might scratch, or what. They're afraid, and so I think a lot of times what happens is, and I know I've done this myself, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to go out there and express love, and then I get my hand bitten by the dog. I'm trying to help with the love, like even just I'm getting bitten. I'm like, well, what was the point of that? Well, I've just now done the very thing that I shouldn't be doing. I've now stopped loving. I've turned it off. I said, well, they don't deserve it. I mean, sometimes I'm enlightened enough to say to myself, oh, well, they're really hurting. That's why they're responding that way. But our mind's still working through these programs of like, well, if you give love, you're supposed to get it back. And that's not always a guarantee. I mean, because people are so hurt, so wounded, so shut off from these things. And I mean, again, I've seen it. I know we've all seen it. And that's why we shut down, because we're like, well, I expressed love. And then I got beaten down or bitten or yelled at or whatever happened to me. And so I'm not going to do that again. And that's part of the challenge of this, is that we constantly have to come back and say, I'm going to keep doing it anyways. And I'm going to trust that it's going to have an impact, even if I can't see it, even if it looks like I got the opposite of what I had hoped to experience. So I felt, given what you said, that I just want to encourage people to keep at it, even because, you don't always get what you hope for, even when you're coming from love with things.
I'm getting a thought that some people may think that following Jesus is hard. It's just too hard. Like, how can you love your enemies? How can you love people? How can you meet those standards and everything? And pleasing God seems like impossible task. Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about that. I have actually struggled with those same thoughts, but the solution is actually, as you said, pretty simple. Basically, as we can see from the 10 Commandments and throughout the Bible of what is expected of people and what Jesus also expected and what he exemplified is showing love to yourself, to the Creator, and to other people. So that's all that is basically required. And love can come in many expressions, meaning that there are myriads of ways of showing love. But it all starts from that attitude. And so 10 Commandments, everything goes together and into harmony with love. So if you are loving other people, then you don't want to hurt them or cause them any harm or such things, of course, or steal their wives or so forth, or their horse or whatever, camel. But I think we are mostly struggling with ourselves, like how to reach that level, how to get there if we are like so broken or in such a condition that it seems to be unable to be achieved. So here actually the divine love comes again to rescue, I would say, to change our conditions and to enable us to walk in this, to be in this and to actually achieve it. I see the divine love being like, I believe it's pretty much the best way to achieve this. And if you start to love because of the divine love in you, gives you ability to love. And that's what Jesus was talking about and exemplifying this divine love. You will automatically become into harmony with the laws of love and also the moral code, the 10 Commandments, and everything else. So if you change because of this divine love, then things become much more easier for you. So it's basically a solution, as I see it. Becoming a loving person through obtaining God's love is the way to this freedom, these opportunities, this level, so to speak.
Yeah, it's when I think about Jesus's teaching, some of it that's recorded in the Bible, he says, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light," and and he's referring to the other rabbis of his time, which were very much about achieving morality and doing good through the purification of their natural love. They wouldn't have talked about it this way, but basically sort of forcing yourself to do the right thing and to always be thinking about how am I, am I doing God's will? Am I following the laws and all these different things? And what you're talking about, Artto, is really, we're talking about a fundamental transformation of our inner being, what we often refer to as the soul. And because we're so used to mental control, the idea that we are going to control other people, circumstances, indeed the world or our corner of the world or whatever, we're going to control it through our minds, it seems impossible. It's this heavy burden. And under these conditions, I believe, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's so close to impossible that it's almost indistinguishable for me. But right, through receiving God's love, through the transformation of the soul, we are then on a journey to becoming someone who naturally, easily, effortlessly just does what they're supposed to be doing, which is loving all the time, loving themselves, the Creator, others, doing this and expressing that in ways that are inspired by the Creator, actually through laws. I know that, when people are asking that question in those terms of like, how do I do this? How do I love all the time? It's like, well, you're not going to turn a corner on this. You've been spending your whole life shutting it off and turning it on, at will in every circumstance in our lives. We do this. We all do that. But as the soul undergoes this transformation, we find ourselves expressing love more easily, more frequently, under circumstances that in the past we would not or could not have done. And whether that's toward ourselves, again, that self-forgiveness, toward others, toward our Creator, toward circumstances or situations. So, I think it's simple, not easy. Yeah, I would want to encourage listeners to stick with it, even when it's hard, because anything worthwhile in this life, it doesn't happen in an instant. There's groundwork, there's preparation, there's practice. And I guess that's another thing that's coming up for me is that I didn't pray for God's love 25 years ago once. I've been praying for it repeatedly over 25 years. And I still have challenges and struggles. But a lot of things that used to haunt me, trouble me when I was younger, caused me issues and problems, they have evaporated. They have disappeared, just like the pain in my chest, just like the shame and the guilt that I experienced from my memories, they have evaporated, they have disappeared, they have dissipated, they are not there anymore. I can remember the past without the pain associated with it. And that for me is where I know that I've experienced a deep healing, that I can remember the facts without the emotional charge or pain associated with it.
Yeah.
And the recognition of when we're not loving, for me, is a clue that, oh, I need to pray more. I need to pray for more of God's love because I just stopped loving. And why did I do that? Oh, it's a habit, and I'm still trying to break it. It's like it's an addiction. I mean, because there are certain sick satisfactions that come from shutting off our flow of love toward other people. Where we tell ourselves we're justified in doing it, and I consider it a subtle form of addiction that hardly anyone recognizes because everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
Like, yep, I'm gonna shut off love in this direction. They did me wrong, and your friends are around you like, yeah, you go and stuff. Yeah, they don't deserve it. Oh, God help us.
Yeah, exactly.
God help us all.
True. Yeah. I think it's time to conclude everything that we have been talking about, and love and forgiveness.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Artto. It was a pleasure being with you, and I always enjoy these conversations and the sharing of our perspectives and things. So thanks so much for having me. It was a real pleasure being with you here today.
I believe you will be on some future episode again. I'm very thankful that you joined me, and we had this wonderful conversation on very human and very important topics. And I thank you very much for taking this time. So be blessed and meet you in the next episode.